Bind, Torture, Kill. Serial Killer Dennis Rader by Whitney Gogan. Rader's childhood. Rader lived with his parents and was the oldest of 4 boys. Rader seemed to have had a normal childhood. He was quiet and reserved. However, he showed signs of being troubled at a young age. He started developing disturbing habits during his childhood, such as hanging stray animals. Even as a young boy, he was able to hide it from the world and live a double life. Just your typical all-American family. Dennis Rader had a normal life. He met and fell in love with his wife, Paula Dietz, and they had 2 children. Rader's education and work background. Rader graduated from Wichita Heights High School in 1963, then attended Kansas Wesleyan College for 2 semesters. He served in the U.S. Air Force from 1966 to 1970. He then graduated from Wichita State University with a degree in criminal justice. While he attended Wichita State, he worked for a home security company, then became a compliance officer in Park City, Kansas. Rader was very active in his church and even served as a Boy Scout leader. Rader's dark, twisted double life. Here are the faces of the victims of Dennis Rader. You have the Otero family, Catherine Bright, Shirley Vian, Nancy Fox, Maureen Hedge, Vicki, and Dolores Davis. The Otero family. Dennis Rader killed the father and the son the same way. He placed a plastic bag over their head and a shirt over top of that, and then another bag over top of their head, and secured it with cords around their necks. Mrs. Otero was strangled with a cord and a rope, and then 11-year-old Josephine Otero was taken to the basement, hands and feet bound still. He hung her from a sewer pipe, pulled her underwear down, and masturbated while he watched her die. Catherine Bright. He had bound her hands and her feet, and he tried to strangle her twice, but she was able to get her hands free each time, and she fought for her life. Which Rader got frustrated, so he pulled out a knife and stabbed her multiple times in her torso. And then you have Shirley Vian. Shirley Vian was sick the day that Rader murdered her. She was wearing her bathrobe because she wasn't feeling well, and Rader had tied her hands and her feet, placed her on the bed on her stomach, put a plastic bag over her head, and took her bathrobe belt, and looped it around her neck and strangled her to death. Nancy Fox. After Rader had broken into her home, he had handcuffed her, and then he had placed her hands and her feet were bound. He had her get on her bed, on her stomach, and he put a belt around her neck and strangled her. And after he strangled her, he replaced the belt with a pair of pantyhose. And then once again, Rader left his DNA at her crime scene. Maureen Hedge. Maureen she had lived in the same neighborhood as Dennis Rader for 30 years. And they knew each other. Well, Rader had broken into her home, and she was asleep. He startled her. And when she woke up and seen him, she started screaming. So Rader just jumps on top of her and starts choking her, and he strangles her with his bare hands. And then you have Vicki. Vicki, he had tied her hands and her feet, and she fought. She fought with him as much as she could, but Rader was on top of her, and he grabbed a nylon sock and strangled her with it. And then you have his final victim, Dolores Davis. He strangled her to death with pantyhose, and then left her body under a bridge. And that's how she dies. Rader's preferences of victims. Although Rader had murdered 2 males, he preferred women. Rader only killed males because he was not aware that they were home when he broke in. Same with the children. Rader killed 2 children during his first murders. However, he did not get a chance to murder Shirley Vian's 3 children. Rader's killing ways. Rader has a certain way he likes to torture his victims. He has sexual fantasies about binding his female victims' hands and feet. Then he strangles them with ropes or pantyhose, and even used a belt to subdue his victims. Rader would masturbate over his female victims' bodies. Getting caught. Rader had his ways to get his name, BTK, out to the public. He went as far as sending letters to the news station, poems, even called the police to report the Nancy Fox murder. But one day, he sent a floppy disk to the police. The police then traced the floppy disk back to the computer that it was sent on. It led the police to the church that Rader attended, then led to Rader. Rader was charged with 10 counts of murder, and he was convicted and sentenced to 172 years in prison without the chance of parole. In conclusion, Rader sought out and stalked his victims. He learned their routines and would cut their phone lines and break into their homes. He would hold them at gunpoint and then tie them up. Rader was a sick individual that had sexual fantasies and acted on them. He would tie these women up, strangle them, and then would be aroused by it, that he would masturbate while watching them die. All the murders he committed were premeditated. He liked being in control and torturing his victims. He murdered 10 innocent people, and he should have been handed the death penalty. However, back when the murders were committed, Kansas did not have the death penalty. So now Dennis Rader will spend the rest of his natural life behind bars and will never be allowed out, which is exactly what he deserves. He was handed 10 consecutive life sentences, but the longest the judge was able to give was 172 years. So Dennis Rader gets to tell his story from behind bars. He has even went as far as drawing sketches of the crime scenes and how he had committed these murders. And he would do it again if he was able to be out. So he is exactly where he deserves to be. He left his DNA at multiple crime scenes, and he had these fantasies that he didn't have to act on, but he did it anyway. So there's people that have lost their loved ones. There's children that's lost their mothers. There's children that's lost multiple family members. And it's not just his victims that suffered from this. It's also his own family, his children, and now his grandchildren, his wife, which is now his ex-wife. Dennis Rader got exactly what he deserved, and that is to spend the rest of his life behind bars. But I believe that he should have been handed the death penalty. And even now, all these years later, he still deserves the death penalty.